welcome to the Moneyshow. I am Nancy. Thank you for joining us again today. Of course, issues around the economy still lingers. What I'm noticing now is that almost everyone is an economist. You're seeing people talking about economy across board, across the TV stations. Why? Because it's an economic recession and Nigerians want us to get out of it fast. I listen to those I can listen, I watch those I can watch, you know, get ideas, and of course listen to what people have to say. I just really need to talk about this. My guest on Monday, Wale Oluwade, canvassed on this program, and I think that was the first time I've actually heard on television. My guest on Monday did say, Nancy, let the federal government return the TSA funds to the banks. And, you know, we argued it out here on Monday. But you know what? Since Monday, I've seen every other person coming out with the same solution. Federal government, you've said this, but the economy is suffering right now, is in intensive care. Perhaps it's even in a coma, you know, or no, it hasn't entered coma yet, isn't it? Or perhaps we're in intensive care, but we need to resuscitate the economy, give back the TSA funds to the banks. Yesterday, a senior advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, echoed the same thing. For me, when I read it this morning on Punch newspapers, his statement, I was like, come off it. It seems Dr. Agbakoba watched the show on Monday. Though I agree with some of the things he said, I do not agree with some of the things that he said. Of course, let me just quote him a bit. He advised the federal government to return the TSA funds to commercial banks and create a new supervisory agency to monitor them. What I don't agree with is create a new supervisory agency when we're saying we have so many agencies of government, we have so many ministries and all of that. Even if the TSA funds will be returned, can we create another modality to monitor them? He also did mention limit the CBN, I'm quoting him now, limit the CBN to monetary policy and take away banking supervision to a new prudential regulatory authority and banking ethics to new financial conduct authority. You know, talk to me about other best practices. I wish I was with him yesterday when he was saying this. As he was saying it, I'll be posing questions back to him. But all of that we will be talking about on the program today. Some analysts are of the view that the country, of course, we're having an official recession right now. But if we don't take time, it will go into a depression. In fact, Dr. Agbakoba did say that, you know, that this may continue till 2020. I always remember what one comedian said some years ago, perhaps like 2-3 years ago, you know, Godons. Godons did say some time ago that we don't do recession already. Since even when unemployment was high, then we had jobless growth, the economy was growing at 6-7%. He did say we don't enter recession since, let alone now that we're having an official recession, that we might just be going into a depression. And what is a depression, to talk about it? Of course, a depression is when you have that sustained recession for 2 or more years. And analysts are saying that we need to tackle this now. If we do not, we're going to have a depression. You have unemployment, you have inflation, you have a shrinking demand. Suppliers, companies will be closing down more than they are right now. So we need to act fast. All right, before I take my top stories today, I really want to talk about TSA funds, because some people are also getting wrong what the TSA is about. I had an interview with the Accountant General of the Federation. When was that? Okay, in May. I had the interview in May of this year, and I did ask him the question, what TSA meant. And let's bring back that interview so that we can enlighten you more on what TSA means. Take a listen.
The TSA, really the objective was to bring about all accounts which hitherto were with commercial banks together onto a single window. And that is exactly what we've been able to do. These resources, these monies we pull together onto TSA are resources of agencies of government, MDAs. And they are not free resources. They are not free funds whereby somebody will say, yes, we have this quantum of money that we can fund our budget, we can utilize it.
Accountant General, I had to bring that up because some people would think, okay, TSA funds are just lying there now. Bam, you know, we need to use it for our budget. But you've heard it from the Accountant General. That interview was done in May of this year, so I had to bring it back. All right, let's take you through the top stories at this hour. Data from the Central Bank of Nigeria show that gross official reserves dropped by $790 million in August on a 30-day moving average basis to $25.4 billion. The monthly average movement has been an outflow of $460 million over the past 12 months. The moving average basis dilutes the immediate impact of the sale of $1.22 billion by the CBN under a 2-month forward contract opened on 20th of June. It also entered into a 3-month contract for $1.57 billion on the same day. That was the same day the new foreign exchange regime was launched. All right, let's talk about borrowing now. The federal government is planning to borrow about 120 billion naira in local currency denominated bonds at an auction on September 14th. The debt office, the debt management office did say on Tuesday that it would raise 40 billion naira each from debt maturing in 2021, 2026, and 2036 using the Dutch auction system. All the bonds are reopenings of previously issued debt. The federal government has estimated that it will borrow around 900 billion naira from the local debt market this year to fund a budget deficit projected at 2.2 trillion naira. The Central Bank of Nigeria has said it is planning to borrow 1.77 billion naira via treasury bills in the last 3 months of the year. In its 4th quarter treasury bill issue program released on Monday, the CBN said it will raise about 815.37 billion naira, comprising 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days debt instrument. Still talking about the economy, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the Vice President of Nigeria, on Tuesday said the federal government has introduced efforts that will improve the ease of doing business in Nigeria. Of course, issue visas on arrival to foreign investors coming into the country. Professor Osinbajo, who doubles as the head of the economic management team, noted that the business of the federal government is to create the right environment for startups as well as the right environment for doing business. Let's take a look at the price of oil today. Prices are inching lower as market participants remain skeptical that producers will reach an agreement to freeze output to rein in a global supply glut. London Brent crude traded down 4 cents today at $47.22 a barrel after settling down 37 cents on Tuesday. All right, that's the price of oil. Just before we go on a break, let me quickly remind you of this. I did an interview on Friday, isn't it, where I had the head of mission of St. Vincent and Grenadines Consulate in Nigeria last week, Friday. Of course, let me just quickly remind you today that St. Vincent and Grenadines Consulate in Nigeria, in conjunction with Caribbean and African Chamber of Investments, invites you to their upcoming Investment and Award Conference on October 10th to 14, 2016. For more information, please call 080-333-08-3732, or you can call 081-8384-5554. The numbers will be put on the screen for you to call the necessary authorities. All right, let's quickly take a break, and when we come back, my guest will be joining me, Johnson Chukwu, the Chief Executive Officer at Carrier Asset Management. We have a lot to talk about concerning the economy. Join us again. Don't forget, you can tweet me. My handle on Twitter is @NancyLu. In case you're just joining us, my guest is with me now, Johnson Chukwu, the Chief Executive Officer at Cowrie Asset Management. Mr. Chukwu, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming. I know you just flew in from Lagos, so how is Lagos?
Well, Lagos is good. The weather today was quite clement. Yesterday was it was a rainy, wet day yesterday, but today was quite good, bright. By the time I left Lagos, but I left Lagos quite early.
How is the economic weather?
That one is difficult to talk about because I understand why I came to Abuja because I want to come and enjoy the goodies. I understand that in Abuja, I heard food is cheap here. In Lagos, the economy is quite tough.
Is food cheap in Abuja? Okay, because some people may think relative distance from Abuja to other parts of the north, that food will be cheaper here than taking it down
That's
south.
what we're told. So at least here we eat enough food.
It depends on if you have the money in your pocket to eat. Where should I start from today? Mr. Chukwu, I have so much to talk about. I have so much to say, so much in my mind. I don't even know where to start releasing it from.
Okay, let's start from there.
Because, you know, are we heading for a depression? Because it's already there that we're in a recession. Are we heading for a depression? I tried to define what the depression meant earlier today. Are we heading for it? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It is a difficult
Looking
one
at it economically.
because we need to have more quarters of contraction before we talk of depression. What I could say today is that we have not taken enough measures to stop the contraction, to stop the deterioration in the economic environment. So that we need to be spurred as a country, particularly the political and economic leaders, to articulate measures that will reverse the ongoing decline in the economic environment. That's the only thing I could say. If we don't do anything, of course, do nothing also means doing something. If you decide you don't want to do anything, and we decide to pray, we're going to find ourselves in a state of depression. If we continue to mouth out that we're going to come out of and rebound, you need sufficient action to get the necessary reaction. So that's the way I'll put it.
You just hit the other part I was thinking about. Should we converge a national prayer on the economy and on our currency? Why are you smiling? I will give you an example where it's been done. In Zambia.
And what happened?
No, I will tell you. In Zambia, the president last year did call for a national prayer on the Zambian currency, the kwacha. That was in October of last year, a national day of prayer. That the economy,
I read about
yes, that the economy was going down, and they needed God to intervene concerning the currency. Of course, you know that Zambia is heavily dependent on copper. I think it's the second largest copper supplier, exporter. That was in October. In April of this year, Zambian currency became the best performing in the world. Because I followed the story that the Zambian kwacha became the best performing currency. Perhaps some other analysts say, okay, it could have been as a result of the appreciation in the price of copper. But perhaps God also did that for copper to rise, for the currency to gain some weight. Should we declare a national day of prayer to get us out of this, since our human efforts aren't doing much? God help us, because people are resorting to prayers now. Should we? It's a funny question, but I think a very valid one.
No, you know why I'm laughing is this. I'm going to tell you, when I was a young boy, I watched a film that is called Other People's Money. It was acted by Danny DeVito, the man who acted Prince, as well, a very short man. And it was talked about that New England Wine Company is dead. That if we pray and pray from now to the next year, it will remain dead. You see, the Bible says that prayer without works is dead.
It's dead.
But all things are possible with prayer, but it must be backed by work. The key things are this. God answers prayers, but God will use the work of your hand to bless you. This is not a pulpit, so I'm not going to start pontificating. If we all pray and do nothing, we will remain where we are. All our situation will deteriorate. And that's why God created medical doctors. So if you are sick, they will ask you to pray, but you also go to a medical doctor and administer medication. So that medication will help you with the prayers, fast track your process of recovery. If we, as a country, want to come out of our crisis, we need to take certain measures. Those measures are economic measures. If we don't take those measures and we convoke a national prayer session, we will find ourselves most likely in a worse situation. In fact, what we're doing is that we're challenging God to, in fact, I don't want to say this over on the national TV, but I think we're distracting God. Because we are bringing petitions that are within our own authority, because God has given us free will as human beings, as humans, to exercise. And we're not exercising those free will, and we're asking God to do the things that God should do, and also do the things that we should do. We, as a people, need to ask ourselves, how do we need to come out of this economic crisis? What are those measures we need to put in place? What are the trade policies we're going to articulate? What are the monetary policies? What are the fiscal policies? And then how do we make sure there's harmony among all these three key policy areas? And how do we ferociously implement those policies? And we have, I mean, it is not strange that countries have gone into depression. Countries have gone into recession. Countries came out of recessions, not by praying, but by taking the appropriate measures to come out of it. South Africa, the second quarter of the year, South African economy rebounded by 3.3% quarter on quarter and 0.6% first quarter, I mean year on year. Principally because they took measures to reverse the decline of 0.1% they recorded in the first quarter of this year. We need to take measures to do that. US economy went into recession 2007, 2008. They came out of it. Greece has bounced out of recession. So, but these countries came out of recession not because by doing something, and we need to do those things. And it's not rocket science. These things, I mean, modern economic literature is replete with what countries have done. What are we doing? Have we adopted any of those policies? Are we reflecting this economy? Are we pumping liquidity into the economy? Are we injecting liquidity into the people's hands? Are we strengthening the banking system so that they go back and do their intermediation role? We need to start from something.
Okay. Now, you did talk about countries that went into recession and came out of it. The US is a very simple example that is very handy. Let's take a look at what the US did during the recession time. Of course, when President Obama was campaigning before 2000, of course, there was recession and all of that. And he was making Americans understand that I'm going to do this when I come in. And I remember clearly that when he came in, 30 days, in fact, when a month after he came in, there were steps to handle the recession head on. What did he do? He had to get the Congress, of course, that was filled with Democrats at that time, to establish what they call the ARRA, if I'm not mistaken, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which is known as the Economic Stimulus Bill. They said, we're going to be spending $800 billion to rejig the economy in terms of tax cuts, as well as spending. That he got the Congress to do. Have we gotten to that point? Now we are in that point, of course, a recession. What do we expect the government, not just only the government, but even the Congress, which is the National Assembly, which I guess they are still on recess now. Recess in a recession. They're on a recess in a recession. Because it seems the attention is also on the federal government, President Buhari. Is there anything the Congress can do, the Nigerian Congress?
The Congress, the duty of the Congress is to make laws. Yes, you can actually have a law that will originate from the Congress, or it can originate from the executive, which is executive bill. But the basic thing is that to manage the economy is basically the call of the executive. You have just itemized a few of the things that the U.S. did, and I want to update us on that. The U.S. did cash handout to individuals. About 130 million American citizens were receiving cash handout from the U.S. federal government, the U.S. government. That was to inject liquidity into the, improve their purchasing power so that those people can resume consumption.
Yes.
2, they strengthened the banking system. 3, they provided financial support to critical industrial sectors.
Like the auto industry and all that.
Okay, and they continued to inject liquidity into the system through quantitative easing by buying up assets and injecting. So, 1, they reflected the liquidity system in the banking system through those asset purchases. 2, they injected liquidity in the hands of individuals. They did a reverse taxation by reducing taxes, not only reducing personal taxes, but even actually giving people checks so that they can spend. What have we done? We have done the opposite of all these things. We are sucking up liquidity from the banking system, making it impossible for banks to lend. We are borrowing money from banking system at 18%, 18.5%, from the public at 18.5%. That means we have crowded at not just the private sector, we have also crowded at the banking industry sector from liquidity. So the banks are not in a position to lend. At the fiscal end, we are talking of imposing tax of 9% on consumption of telecom services. We have not engaged in massive infrastructure development as we expect in a country in a recession. Today, we have sucked in about 3.5 trillion naira from the banking system through the treasury single account. All these are taking away liquidity, not injecting liquidity into the system.
Are you of the view that the TSA funds should be returned to the DMBs? Because my guest on Monday started that conversation, and I argued it out here with him on Monday. But I'm really surprised. From Monday, everyone is echoing it. Olisa Agbakoba yesterday, in fact, was at the press conference. At least I read it in Punch newspapers this morning. I was like, what? So Dr. Agbakoba was watching the show on Monday, because it seems that everything that we said here was what he re-echoed back.
You know, interestingly, I said when the TSA was being implemented that it's going to have adverse effect. And I was of the opinion that taking about 3.5 trillion from the banking system in one first swoop was going to have very severe impact. By the time those monies were taken, interbank borrowing was at about more than 100%. The banks have not recovered their liquidity since then. So the issue of intermediation, which is the role of the banks, to take money from the surplus unit and give to the deficit unit, has ended or has effectively frozen since the money was taken out of the system. Today, there are people who want to go into small-scale businesses. They don't need to import anything.
The question will
but
be,
they need to access
Mr.
funding.
Chukwu, the question will be, when the TSA funds were in the banks, what were the banks doing with it? Were they still borrowing to the real sector? The answer is absolutely no, or little or nothing. Okay. Intervention funds, were they doing that? Little or nothing.
Okay, let's look at it.
They were
the banks
comfortable with armchair banking, and they weren't doing performing their intermediate.
I think we discussed something like this
yes.
In one of your programs. And my position is banks are financial institutions. They are private sector driven institutions. What they do is they make logical decisions on where to put their money in.
And make profit.
And I want to share with us, in Nigerian experience, I'm not going to go back to America or UK. In 2008, between 2008 and 2010, when liquidity was injected into the banking system by AMCON, government money was given to the banks by AMCON. The banks were coming from a distressed situation. A couple of the banks were distressed, you remember. What the central bank did then was they reduced yield on treasury bills to 1 to 3%.
So it will not be attractive.
So it was not attractive. And banks shifted from asking their staff to go and look for deposits, and then they began to ask their staff to go and look for borrowers. The banks were now begging people for viable lending projects because it was cheap for them to mobilize money. They were not going to make money from investing T-bills. They were going to make their money by preparing, assessing, and reviewing proper credits and monitoring those credits. And that became the shift of the attention of the banks then. If a rational person, you give me 100 million naira, I'm a rational person, and you tell me I can put this money in a federal government risk-free instrument at 18%, and you ask me to, in the alternative, give this money to Nancy at 20%, I will make 1% loan loss provision. I will have to keep my liquidity ratio. I have to employ 10 people to write the credit, review the credit, monitor the credit.
There's a risk that Nancy may not.
And there is a risk that Nancy will not pay me.
Pay back.
I must be daft to leave the 18% that is assured.
That is assured, yeah.
And give the money to Nancy at 20%. And the 18% is upfront interest. So in the effective yield on that 18% will be something like 19.5 to 20%. So if banks are rational entities, if banks are managed by rational people, then you need to create the policy environment that will compel them to act in the direction that you want and not act in a direction that will be self-serving.
So you're saying the TSA funds should be returned?
I wouldn't put it that TSA funds should be returned. I want to believe that we have enough technological tools today to allow the banks manage those funds and still ensure that the central bank,
I
the
don't
federal
understand
government.
what you mean.
Let me tell you.
Are you trying to be politically
No, I'm not
correct?
being politically correct. Let me tell
Should
you.
they return it, then there's a monitoring mechanism. Just like Olisagba said, I don't know if you saw it.
I read it.
Supervisory agency.
I read it.
That's
But my approach is this. If you leave the banks, the money with the banks, and you sweep on a daily basis, you're saying whatever is not used will be swept. And the next money you credit, there's some, if you have ever managed what they call an impress account, you can actually tell the person managing the impress account, at the end of the day, transfer this back to me. That way, if it is not used, it is available for the public to use. The banks need liquidity. It may not be a case of, okay, just live with the banks. But even if you want to live with the banks, you can have a record of what is where. You can automate that process. On your desk, you can see this money is with this bank, this money is with this bank. And you can actually require the banks to pay a reasonable level of interest. Maybe
on warehousing that
on the balances with them. So the banks will have the leeway to now lend that money. If the banks are paying, for instance, they're paying 5% interest on any federal government fund with them, the bank will be compelled to begin to lend. Because if they pay that interest and they don't lend, it's going to be a direct negative on their P&L. So if they have to pay the 5% interest, they will go immediately to seek for somebody to take that money at 8% or 10%. So the key thing is, instead of freezing the 3.5 trillion or thereabout, we can put this money, okay, in the first place, with the central bank, is it any government any interest? It's not working. It's neither working for the federal government, not working for the banks, not working for the economy, not working for you and I. If 5.3 trillion is lent out with the banks and they pay 5% interest, 5% on 3 trillion will give you something like 150 billion on 3 trillion. We give you
150 billion.
150
That's
billion.
5% on 3
That's 5%
trillion.
on. That is the income that the federal government can make by giving this money to the banks. The banks will now lend that money and create economic activities. So the banks will gain from the spread they will get, the economy will gain from accessing loans, people will get employment, and then every one of us will be better off for it.
Isn't it a tricky one? Because you know that we're talking about economic recession. Every one of us, every sector has a role to play, yes or no? Critically, especially the banks. You know, there was something I was reading some time ago, and it did say that perhaps the true test of an economic policy is, or the true test that an economic policy is good is how unpopular it is. What do you think? Because some of the policies that the government has put out, a lot of analysts have criticized those policies. What do you think?
Well, for me, managing a central bank or managing the economy is not a popularity contest, not a beauty contest. Some of the decisions you will take will be painful at the onset, but ultimately the ultimate objective should be that you're going to grow the economy, create employment, possibly diversify the economy further. I don't see why Nigerians wouldn't want to take short-term pains. Like I think I mentioned it to you at the other time that look, the president enjoyed so much of so much of goodwill when he came in.
So you're saying it's no more present tense now?
I don't think the
so
ratings
no
of the president would be as it was when he came in. To the point that he implemented policies that no government has ever implemented without a whimper. Abacha tried to increase fuel. No, we went to the streets on several occasions. Jonathan did it. We shut down the country. He did it. There was no single whimper. Nobody complained. People were at best okay. Well,
some people complained, like
yeah,
the NLC and co. They did complain.
So what did they do? They never called anybody to the streets, not for once. But I'm saying that look, the president has so much of goodwill that has not been fully tapped. If the government comes up with a policy and says, look, we're going to go through a difficult period for the next 1 year, but these are the measures we are putting in place that will reverse that. Just like the president said in Benin yesterday that Nigeria will bounce back. That's encouraging, but we need to see how it will bounce back. We need to see the route. We need to see what is being put in place to make sure we bounce back. We need to make sure it's not just only prayers. That there is also action backing up that, supporting that prayers. So I don't think the issue is whether the police are popular or not. The issue is that people are saying, let's even see the roadmap. Nancy, I can tell you that when you have a fracture, which is the kind of situation we are in the economy today, when you have a fracture, the orthopedic doctor will tell you it's going to be painful. You will know that you're going to go through some pains. But you have a choice to say, look, I don't want to go through the pains, and one day the leg will be amputated. So you will prepare your mind to take the pains. Every day they're going to treat you, you prepare for pains. In fact, if you're being administered medication every morning, you prepare your mind for pains. But you know that you need those pains to work again.
The government, the doctor would also give me some painkillers to ensure
yes,
that
that's
so what are the painkillers?
That's what you call palliative.
Yes, palliative. What are the painkillers now? I got you there, isn't it? I got you there, isn't it? Because the doctor will say, okay, Nancy, you have a fracture. Okay, let's give you some kind of painkillers or some of the popular analgesics or painkillers. Take this so that the pain wouldn't hurt. What are the painkillers that the government is putting forward?
No, we even need to hear
them
the
say
roadmap. We wouldn't even need to hear, look, this is what we're going to do. This process will lead to this level of discomfort. And this is what we're going to do to moderate the difficulties we're going to go through before we get our destination. But right now, we've not heard that. We're waiting to hear that. I'm hoping that in the next few days, the president should address or would address the nation and tell us exactly what the government is doing to reverse the economic decline.
You think the president should address the nation? Because I raised this question, was it also on Monday, that the president, of course, you've seen in America it was done, yes, because America is we're always quick to say America, though we are far, 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 you know, they are far ahead of us. Should the president address the nation on, guys, listen, we know we're in a recession, but this and this is what we're doing. And the guest did tell me, Nancy, talk is cheap. Because you can see that almost all of his people, or some of his people are talking. Some don't even want to talk, but some have been talking. Some have been talking on social media and all of that. That talk is cheap. Show us action. It's a matter of coming to television and saying, okay, to be well. Just like he said in Benin yesterday. I did actually also listen to the president in Benin yesterday that the country will be greater again. And I remember Donald Trump of the United States.
The man may win the election.
Yeah, in fact, that's another ball game because he's leading. But we are not talking about the U.S. economy, U.S. politics now. That should be a different topic.
Okay,
that Nigeria will get greater again. So is it just addressing us via television or talking to us, but action?
Okay, what I think will happen, if it doesn't happen before the 1st of October, it will happen by 1st of October. The president will address the nation. The president will articulate the measures the government is going to put in place to reverse the decline. I don't think the president is insensitive. I believe in his heart of heart he means well for this country. He has contested for the election about 4 times. So anybody who came out to offer himself to serve his country,
people say he's the most prepared because of
everything
the
to serve his country.
years.
He obviously means well for the country. Like one of their ministers, one of his ministers said that they actually ran into what they didn't prepare for. So I want to believe that this remaining 13 days, 23 days, will be enough for them to articulate a policy action that the president will announce to the Nigerians. Otherwise, the 1st October speech will not be valuable if it doesn't come with an articulate economic plan to address the economic crisis. But I want to believe that the president knows that. The president is working on that. He's bidding for his time, and he obviously wants to come out with a policy pronouncement that the government will not implement from 1st of October. I don't think any president will superintend over a country that has gone into recession and not feel the urge to talk to his countrymen.
Because intention is something else, then action is another. Because we all have good intentions, yes or no. You would like your intentions, or I would like to be this next year. I would like to have this next week. They are all intentions, but what are the actions that you're putting in place? That's one ball game. The other thing is, let's take a look at this development partners, because I really also want to bring them in. Since we're having an economic recession, the likes of the World Bank and the IMF, what do you think that these guys can do to help Nigeria get out of recession? Is there anything they can do? Because some people have also said that we should forget these guys. that they are part of those that have actually brought us into it. You know, even for IMF itself, the Nigerians have one kind of feeling to IMF they don't want to hear because they believe, oh, IMF austerity measures. What do you think? Are there things they can do?
Well, there are things they can do if we invite them. They're not going to jump on us and do anything. If we want their support, if we want their assistance, we seek for it. Ghana has sought for IMF, and Ghana is implementing the 4 policy directives to meet the requirements for accessing the about $918 million. I mean, Ghana is lucky. The amount they require is
small.
So small. But in any case, if we need their support, I want to believe they will avail us of their support. Today, what we've done in the past is to grandstand and say we don't need IMF, we don't need World Bank. We need them. Today, we need external funding to stabilize the exchange rate. And you need it to stabilize the exchange rate before you begin to attract funding from foreign direct investors and foreign portfolio investors. And you need external funding to be able to restore growth because we do not have the capital accumulated locally. Neither are we going to earn enough from sale of crude to lead to a reversal of our current economic crisis. So you need external support. And that external support would either come from a multilateral agency like IMF or World Bank or come from a bilateral agency like China. So if we keep grandstanding and say, look, we don't need this, that's not true. We need support today. We do not have the financial resources to stabilize the exchange rate. And if we don't take measures to stabilize the exchange rate, it's going to deteriorate further. And if you don't stabilize the exchange rate, you're not going to have inflows. If you don't have inflows, you may not experience any recovery because we don't have that capital today. So we need all this, we need chain of events. We need to do a couple of things to restore economic recovery and economic growth. And one of which would be accessing funding from outside the current earnings of the government.
Perhaps an all, if you take a look at it, the question will be that an all-out crisis requires an all-out policy response, isn't it?
Yes, and I can tell you off the cuff that there are a couple of things we should do. I've mentioned the issue of accessing funding from outside the country. 2, we should also evolve a policy that will allow the government to concession some of the key infrastructure. We need to present this government and on the policy orientation of the government as open to private sector.
Good.
As private sector driven. We need to access funding, short-term measures. We need to, in the medium term, we need to be able to concession infrastructure and attract capital in form of foreign direct investment to invest in those critical infrastructure. 3, we may need to think of corporatizing some of the assets that the government is not able because it doesn't have the financial liquidity to fully fund and selling them to private sector investors. Take, for instance, the JV partnership investments. Today, the government cannot meet its cash calls. So even if oil prices rebound, our production will gradually go down because we are not investing more in exploration and production. So because the government cannot meet its cash call requirements, we may need to look at that again and say, look, we've toyed with the issue of PIB, which includes the corporatizing those JVs into corporate joint ventures. The government can sell some of those shares in those JVs to the foreign companies. Remember that the petroleum tax, profit tax is 95%. Yeah. We can still trap enough income by just imposing taxes on such operators, whereas we can fast forward our earnings by selling our equity in those assets, oil blocks.
Are you okay?
I'm just giving you some of the several things we need to do. Then
are you going for concession or privatization? Because the government should also come up with an articulated policy. This is what we want to do. Either we want to privatize, we want to sell some of our assets, or we want to concession.
There are some assets that are amenable to privatization, some are amenable to concessioning only. If you take, for instance, the highways, you're not going to privatize the highway, you're going to concession it. So under a BOT, build, operate, and transfer, the investors will bring in the money, build it, operate it, recover their money over a period of time, and transfer it back to the country. And one of the examples that usually come to my mind is the Lagos-Kano rail line. That project was, that standard gauge rail was given out to passengers in 2006 for $8.3 billion. It was not built because we decided to reverse that. That is still available. It's a commercially viable corridor. If you if you evolve the legal and commercial framework and ask investors globally to bid to build, operate, and transfer that rail line and manage for 30 years or thereabouts, you're going to get bids from everywhere in the world because it's commercially viable. If you do a rail line that runs through Benin, from Lagos through Benin, through Onitsha, through Asaba, to Abad, to Port Harcourt, or Calabar, it's going to be commercially viable because those are the routes that traders take. And you can actually concession it, and maybe another 8.55 billion, 10 billion will come in. If you have these two projects, and they are concessioned at 20 billion, for instance, and the investors are foreign investors, they will at least bring in capital importation into this country of at least 10 to 15 billion. That will form part of our liquid reserve, which will help stabilize the exchanges. Look at the airport. We don't have a modern airport. Today, if the government has to build the airport, it will take us donkey years before we will save money from sale of crude to build the airports. So if you can't build the airport, what would it cost us to come up with the appropriate framework, legal and commercial framework, to concession the airports? And let somebody else build us modern airports, and then turn Lagos and Abuja into West African hubs, and then build the auxiliary support infrastructure like the road that takes you from an airport and joins going to Badagry, so that those who are going to Benin Republic, going to Togo, going to Ghana, we can land in Lagos, enter a vehicle, and get to Ghana in 1 hour, 30 minutes, or 2 hours, or 3 hours. And then you turn Lagos into an aviation hub. We need to, because we can't build it. So if we're going to wait to build this, we're going to wait until maybe our children have become grown gray hairs.
How confident are you with the president's economic team? Because a lot of people have challenges with that team as it's constituted. Of course, the ministers, the CBN governor that is also headed by the vice president, who of course a lot of people said is a fantastic lawyer, but a lawyer cannot run an economy. And running an economy in a recession, you don't learn on the job while the economy is in a recession. What do you think? Should there be an advisory body constituted as a matter of fact, quickly, made up of economists and, you know, ancillary professions that would advise the president? We are in a recession, like a war room, so to speak. Yes, let me put it that way. An economic war room.
I think there are two things we need to do. I'm not going to sit down here and talk about the present composition of the cabinet. I think the people there on their individual merits have proven in their previous engagement as being competent. I mean, the CBN governor was a bank MD. So you cannot dismiss somebody who rose to the position of a bank MD, one of the biggest banks in the country. The ministers you have, they have distinguished themselves in their different professions. What we need is some level of articulation, some level of harmonization. Then we need to see the brain of the government. And what I mean by the brain of the government, where the ideas are cooked. Within Obasanjo's government, Soludo provided a lot of that when he was the chief economic advisor. He provided the seed and the needs.
Yes.
And that became the economic blueprint of the government. We need, you see, when you are doing certain jobs, you get, I run a relatively medium-sized enterprise, Kaure. And I know when I get to the office by 8 in the morning, because I try to get to the office before 8, until I leave the office by 8 or 9 in the evening, I will be buffeted by so many people coming for meetings, bumping in on me for meetings. I have, as a matter of policy, said, look, family members, unless you have emergency, don't call me during the working hours, because I have enough distraction to contend with. You can call me late in the night or call me on weekends, unless you have an emergency. So even attending to official assignment, running a company as small as Kauri Asset, will keep you 100% engaged. So you really realize that, look, for me to do intellectual work, I have to do it at home. I have to sacrifice my night. So, but the people running the government today, there's no way they will have enough time. So what I expect that the government will come up with, they need to come up with, and that's why you have Ministry of National Planning. There should be the point, there are people who are charged with coming up, articulating policies. So when they articulate the policies, the economic management team of the government will now review it and make sure it aligns with the overall objective and vision of the government. And then you now charge those ministers to ferociously and aggressively implement those things.
Let me ask you this, because these economic challenges we are talking about, is it exaggerated? Is the media over sensationalizing it? Because yesterday I did read in, last night, I think Premium Times, I don't know if you saw that, the DG of NAN. Bayo. I needed to say it. You know.
But when I was coming to your city, I saw one of your colleagues, and he said, don't mind Bayo.
You know, what do you think that is being exaggerated and that the media is taking this thing too far? In fact, a lot of people have also said, oh, AIT, a PDP channel, you are peddling this thing too far. What do you think? Are we, that is when I mean we, everyone, is the media, the newspapers exaggerating this thing too far? Just like Mr. Nonuga of NAN said.
I will answer you with a question, a rhetorical question. Nancy, is your income still the same as it was?
It's not.
Can you still afford the things you used to buy?
No, I've cut down. In fact, I haven't made new money.
And you're a big woman, though.
I don't know that. Like I did ask people earlier on in the day, and I think I asked you, have you made new money? I've been asking, in fact, who did I say was it last week? I said, have you made new money? Tell me where to make new money. So perhaps what we've been spending is what we've actually saved for a while, or some of the investments that we have.
No, you know, because you're a big woman, maybe you don't go to the market to buy rice.
I do. A bag of rice is about 33,000.
Some big small boys like us are feeling as if some rat has eaten our
my
pocket.
People are laughing, actually. Okay.
So the great thing is this. Nobody needs to preach to you or tell you we're going through an economic crisis. Your pocket will tell you whether you are going through economic crisis. If you are so fortunate and you are not going through an economic crisis, well, please tell me the Goshen where you live. I'll come and live beside you. But I know that I, my family, and my friends and relations are going through some economic challenges.
So that means you're dismissing what Mr. Nonuga said. That is not true. Because
he said he's not going through it now.
He's not going through it.
So how will I dismiss him?
Because some people may not be going through this economic challenge.
Yes, the reality of there's no way in the society where everybody will face same challenge. Some may be making new money, and some are making money they never made in their life. Some have been fortunate; they are occupying positions they never occupied at that time in their life. So some have never entered plane. They're entering plane for the first time. They're flying their children overseas to go to school. So if that's happening for them, so why would they think anybody is suffering?
It's suffering. Okay. Nzome on Twitter says, President Buhari, if he fails to take proactive steps, then we may land in depression. Please, President Buhari, listen now. That's from Herman. While Chinedum says it doesn't matter how much we relax visa for investors. If they are not safe to come here, they will not come. I think I talked about it when I started the show. The federal government, Vice President did say, okay, that they are relaxing visas. And I think he has a point. Chinedum has a point. If your place is not attractive, they don't come. Whether you relax visa policies or not, they will not come, because what will attract them? We know we have a difference between investors. You have portfolio investors, and you also have the foreign investors themselves. Okay, Roger said, Nancy, the TSA should be returned back to the banks. The likes of Professor Patatomi, Professor Soludo should be brought in, no longer politics. While Amujio Gu says, this is not time to play politics, neither the time to continue lying to ourselves. The issue of TSA should be suspended. Okay, Dr. Andrew Ilo, is that my cousin? Oh, okay, he's tweeting. I don't know if he's watching. Having a private sector-driven economy, get all infrastructure working, encourage small business, you see a total less dependence on government. Okay, Funsho Alabi says, the banks are using government money to kill the economy when they have the money. Can your guest answer your question on that? I think you've answered it on TSA. We've talked about that. Okay, Yusuf says, I don't think it's necessary for the TSA to be returned. A lot of people are talking, but as we end the show today, what's your... I don't even know what to say. Just finish your thoughts. Just because we've been talking about a lot of things.
My belief is that the president would have been stimulated into action, would have been gingered into action by what the publication by Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. And I want to believe the president will respond forcefully. That will first stand by ideas. You see, the first thing is that we must conceive, we must have the idea, the concept of what we want to do before we start firing. And that leads me to the issue of economic emergency. I want the government to articulate clearly how we are going to respond to the economic depression. I don't think the right response would just be to declare an economic emergency. I think government should avoid shooting from the hip. Let's even see where we're going to, and then agree on the measures and the tools that we need to get there. But we need to act quickly.
Okay. I think we'll leave it at that. Many thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Many thanks for coming on the program. When it comes to economic matters, a whole lot, you know. I think I heard the essay to the president on economic matters, Dr. Dipe Olu, say that economics is not physics. I'll bring him here in days ahead and he will explain what that means to me as a physics student myself. All right, many thanks for coming on the show. All right, I've been speaking with Mr. Johnson Chukwu, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Cowry Asset Management. We've been looking at the state of the Nigerian economy. Of course, he did say when we started, is there any point in saying we should have a national day of prayer? Faith without work is dead. So we should have actions just like the Zambians did. But many thanks for your tweets. Thank you for joining us today. Please stay tuned again tomorrow. Of course, we'll bring in a fresher perspective to you. Don't forget, be the best you can be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Ilo. God bless Nigeria. Bye now.